Welcome back to a therapist, me answering therapy questions from you all, or from Quora, the question answer site. So I've got a couple loaded up today. We'll see how many we make it through. As always, I'll keep these around the 20-minute marker, but we'll see where it goes. So the first question that I have is an interesting one. Question: my therapist suggests that I take up a bad habit. Are there any suggestions? So I'm jumping in with this one because I'm racking my brain to think of a reason why, as a therapist, you would recommend your clients to take on a bad habit. Now, some things that I can think of here would be maybe if this is a perfectionist or they feel like everything they need to do has to be productive or useful, or that they're overly focused on too many good things. But I can't think why a bad habit would be useful. So the person is, their question is the suggestions for bad habits. They're not really asking my opinion, but I feel like this is an important one because I think if you have a therapist recommending you do bad things, there's a very strong need to really question that. Maybe there's a reason, but I can't think of any scenario where a bad thing is helpful. There might be times where doing bad things are easier, but long term those aren't helpful. I can't think of why a bad habit could be useful. I wouldn't do that at all. So, kind of a brief first question, but I need to be presented with what exactly this means in more detail because this is not a great recommendation or suggestion. There's never really a moment where doing bad is useful. So, and I bring this question up because a lot of people have questions around the advice or the direction their therapists give them. And I say advice when really we're not supposed to give advice, but direction or encouragement, perhaps. Therapy is a very isolated field, so a lot of times people don't know what to compare to. There's not active video online. Your social media or influencer therapists aren't posting their therapy sessions. They're just posting thoughts. Whereas, like, at least in the fitness world, you can watch them do their workouts and work with their clients. And same with really most fields in ours, because of HIPAA compliance and confidentiality, we can't really show the work that we're doing. And there's some cases where clients can sign off on that, but usually it's considered inappropriate. So it's good that these questions are out there, and I want to encourage people to ask them because they're really, this isn't quite that category, but comparison questions. Is this a normal thing for therapy? This? No. Gosh, I mean, maybe there's some interpretation here, but reading it black and white, don't take up a bad habit. So that's our first starting question. Okay. Question 2. What are some ways you can be a good client for your therapist? And what are some ways you could be bad? So if it's coming from a place of I need to be a good client for my therapist, bring that up because you probably need to work on that part of you, because that's not your job to be a good client to your therapist. So there's a high chance of this having some people pleaser aspects to it, or wanting to perform well or make my therapist happy. I need to please them, especially if you have a good relationship with them. They can sometimes take on a parenting role inadvertently, not that they're being babying or parenting, but that you look up to them and you want to please them, you want to make them happy, and that's not really your therapist's job to be the parent, and it's not your job to be subservient to them. They're supposed to help guide you as an adult, even if you're not an adult, guide you in the place that you are, not in a fully top-down positional way. So yeah, so if that's coming from a place of need, I need to fulfill that, then that's kind of my encouragement there. If it's just a genuine question of, I'll use fitness example again. If I'm saying I want to be a good client to my personal trainer, another way to phrase that is I want to make their job easier, and I want to do a good job of giving them what they need. A piece of advice I got that I think I can relate this to this field a little bit is understanding the software development world a little bit, which I have relatively minimal, but I think more knowledge than the average person about what that looks like, just because of life experience and some of the programs I use and needing assistance on them. But a good piece of advice I got was when there's a bug or when there's an issue with the software you're using, something's not working properly. when you report it to the company or the individual and say, hey, this feature didn't work. Okay. And that's helpful. But what they often like, and what makes you maybe an ideal client in that sense, is to say, this feature didn't work. Before that, I uploaded this. So I'll use a real example with the video desyncing issue I had with audio video for a program that I use. And I said, the audio is out of sync. What I did was I recorded this video on my computer. I uploaded it to the website. I clicked on this feature for the video editing tool. It was running the processes, edited it this way. I did a secondary edit feature. The final result was this audio desync starts synced and ends unsynced. So I laid out as many steps as I could leading up to it, and that can help programmers to know it's possible that the issue happened during one of those earlier steps, not just the outcome was poor. So another way to look at that with therapy is what makes you a good client, perhaps in relationship to how you interact with the therapist, is that you, one, need to start from a place of trusting the therapist, and trust is a built experience. So the initial trust comes from the initial consultation process, those first interactions. And the thought that you want to have is, I feel like I could trust this person. You don't know them, but you don't want to have any bad feelings. You don't want to have any discomfort or feel scared of them or feel like you have to perform. Some of that's personality, but if you feel unsafe or like this person's going to be hard to engage with, that's not ideal. So for me, a good client, so to speak, is one that we've discussed that on the phone. They need to have a good feel for me. They need to feel comfortable enough with me to grow that relationship. They need to be willing to hear what I say. They're paying me to help them progress. So if they're going to try and one-up me or talk over me or put me down, it's a waste of their time, my time, and their money. You need to be able to listen to the therapist. And if you don't trust their input and you're like, that's no, then find a new one, because you're not going to take that in. And then to actually do the work on your own time. I say this pretty much exactly the same way I'm going to tell you now. To my clients, I say, this hour is yours. I'm here and I get paid no matter how you use it. You need to use it in the way that's going to best help you. And so part of that good client piece is they need to make good use of the time. I can only go so far. They need to meet me halfway. They need to be forthright with what they're dealing with. If I have to spend half the session prying at them to even share something, the question starts to come up of, how bad do you want this? And that's usually something we try to establish early on. Are you here because you want change? Because a parent or a partner said you needed change? Because you feel like the world wants you to change? And you start to parse that out. This happens a lot when working with kids or teenagers, is their parents want them to be there more than they want to be there. And then you have to change your approach. So one of the approaches I utilize is symbolic experiential therapy, which is created by Carl Whitaker. And one of the concepts that he has, which I really like, it's a two-part concept, is the battle for structure and the battle for initiative. These are two battles for how therapy works that have to be done properly, or you might as well essentially just stop doing the work. Battle for initiative has to be won by the client in order for therapy to work. What that means is they have to beat you with wanting to be there. They have to want this more than you as the therapist wants it. Battle for structure is the opposite. The therapist has to win that. And what that means is the therapist has to be in control of their room. Now, this theory comes from family therapy. And so what that means is you can't have the family taking charge of the room, or you can't have maybe the dominant family member coming in and taking over the process. So this is more relevant in family therapy and even couples therapy than it is individual. But the concept still remains. I have to be in charge of the room and you have to be in charge of your progress. And then we work together in those areas. So it's hard to be a bad client. The issue is really just the question of, why are you here? It doesn't seem like you try. It doesn't seem like you put effort in. And sometimes people just take a lot to get their stuff going and to get it out. But some people, it is a question of, why are you here? And, we talked about goals, but then every week I have to, it's like pulling teeth to get you to even share. So that's worth questioning. It doesn't mean they're not trying, but it could mean they're not. So we press into that. And again, I don't like the language of someone being a bad client. really, to me, it's a question of that. Is there initiative? And if there isn't initiative, you know, this is your time and money. Like, what are you doing here? And um, like I said, if you can parse out that they just don't know how to dig deeper, that's one thing, and we can keep working on that. But if they're continuously like, I don't know, then we really want to start pushing into what's their purpose of being here. Uh, Again, same with like personal training. If the person comes up and they complain about every workout and they're not putting in the energy or the effort, and they're low energy all the time, like you'd start to wonder, like, do you want progress? Like, why? What's Is there an ulterior motive? And there sometimes is. Sometimes people, they're going to therapy, and you learn later it's like, oh, because so and so said you needed to, and you're just doing this to do it. And that's why the conversational, relational side of this process is extremely important. Yeah. Question 3. On to the next one. What are some of the bad habits you think people should stop doing? I have a lot. Mental health specific. Some of the things that people are doing that are not good for your mental health that I see a lot of the time. And, I'm going to try to focus on habits, because some of these are certain like lifestyle things that people do, and we'll try this. So one habit for a lot of people is definitely drinking. Most people need to reduce that. When I say most people, I mean most people who drink. So a lot of people don't drink at all, but most people who do drink generally, and there's a little bit of a bias with people coming into my office, so I'm not really speaking to every type of person, but from a mental health perspective, drinking is quite bad for you, but so is fast food. And so, I like to use that example because it doesn't mean you have to cut it completely out, but the really consistent recent research in the last few years shows brain damage after 2 drinks a week. So on your 3rd drink of a week, you can see that in brain scans. So do it that way you will. So once you hit your 3rd drink, and then into your 4th, 5th, each consecutive one, you're damaging your brain every single drink after that. So it's just not a useful habit. And again, there's nothing, in my opinion, inherently bad about that. It's just the excessiveness. And most people's definition of excessive is way more severe. A lot of people are alcoholics and think they're just casual drinkers. If you drink every day, that's a problem. If you're getting drunk, that's a problem. And that's for most people, because usually you need more than 2 drinks. Some very, very lightweight people, on an empty stomach after 2 drinks, and you're drunk, well, you haven't really hit the brain damage part yet, I guess. So it depends on how alcohol affects you. But generally, if you're getting drunk, it's very unhealthy. It's a bad habit. If you're drinking daily, it's a bad habit. This can be a sensitive one, which is why I bring it up. It's just where the research is at with it. And if you generally look at the type of decisions people are making while drinking versus when they're not, they average worse decisions. So part of it's just objective, looking at behavior that's associated and the type of culture that's associated. A lot of people who are out drinking and getting drunk, there's also high association with people getting in fights, people getting assaulted, people having really dangerous encounters. There's just a lot connected with drinking that is really dangerous. So, and this is I'm speaking as someone who has a table in my home that just has alcohol in it. So I'm not saying this is a horrible thing, but what I'm saying is that is done in moderation. And I really don't drink that much. I enjoy trying different whiskeys and have a handful. So the bad habit is the excessive nature. And so limit that. Another bad habit is being on your phone at night in bed, which I struggle with, and a lot of people do. It's really detrimental because usually we're wasting time and we end up going to bed later, and it's really bad for entering into sleep and getting deep sleep. And typically people are using that time to doom scroll, as we like to call it, and just fill your brain with stuff that's not helpful. So the mixture of all of those is a very common bad habit that I see with a lot of people. Another bad habit is dismissiveness. a lot of people are very quick to be negative towards other human beings when they are inconvenienced. The counter to that is actively moving towards relationship and forgiveness. People come in all the time just stressed about interactions that they have and, you know, screw this person and that person, this, and it's too much to carry. Forgiveness, acceptance, moving towards relational equality and love is way more beneficial. It destroys you to hold grudges and to even shame yourself for interactions and to not forgive and to hold on to these things. It's really damaging. People do it all the time. All the time. Um, yeah, it happens a lot. Another bad habit is running away from conversations. That kind of tacks onto the last one. But man, I don't know if this has existed throughout all time, but definitely this current era, people ghost people a lot. People refuse to have hard conversations. It's very unhealthy because you don't get resolution. You just escape the issue. And that's not the same thing. Those are not the same thing at all. And people confuse them as the same thing a lot. I'm dealing with this hard thing at work. I don't know how to handle it. And then it resolves itself. And you're like, oh, thank goodness. I made it through that. No, you didn't. It went away. You didn't work through anything. If it happens again, you're in the same spot because you didn't grow and you didn't resolve it. So it's just an escape from that. And sometimes that's fine. I don't think every horrible thing we need to find some sort of bliss and enlightenment through. But relational struggles, a lot of times people just hope they disappear or they themselves disappear. And there are appropriate times for that, but they're far and few between. Most of the time, overwhelmingly most of the time, you're going to benefit more by trying to have the hard conversation. And I know there's complications with power and control at times. Work is a very big example of, well, my work is on the line for this. I understand that. And then we have to talk about, why are you working there if that's the type of dynamics? Well, because I need a job. Okay, and we can start to narrow that down, but you get a lot of people whose soul is kind of being eaten away in these environments, and that's why we want to pivot out if we can't have the conversation. So being able to have tough conversations is a really good guidepost to if you're even in healthy relationships to begin with. Because if we can have a hard conversation, that means there's enough relational equity built in there, or there's enough trust that we can feel comfortable approaching that person. If we have a huge fear, and that fear can be backed up, because sometimes there's anxiety fears and unreasonable fears. But if that fear can be backed up and we can say, hey, behaviorally, this is what I've seen, or this is the culture I'm in, I could lose my job for trying to have a hard conversation. That's a problem. And that's worth discussing. Do we start looking at other job opportunities? I understand there's complications in that. I've done this a lot in my office. I have to give a very shortened version of the process here. Those are real discussions that we have, and we ultimately make those decisions ourselves. So yeah, it can be tough. So I think I'll do one more question. Let's just stay in theme here a little bit. What methods do experienced therapists recommend for breaking bad habits? I am an experienced therapist. Less than others, more than some. Very cliche answer that I'm about to give, but genuinely, the Atomic Habits book by James Clear is a master class in understanding habits and forming and breaking them. Genuinely read that. There's a YouTube video. I'll try to find it and link it into this video. It's like 37 minutes, and it's a really, really good condensed summary of his book. It's a phenomenal summary. Borderline can replace the book if you need it to, but the book has anecdotes that are really good. This is a fantastic book. It really is. If this guy never does a thing in his whole life, I think he's earned his stay, so to speak, 1,000 times over. It's a very, very, very good book. One of the best mental health books you will ever read. One of the best self-help books you will ever read. Absolutely going to be a classic. There's no question about that. People are going to read this for a very long time. Go look at that book. Atomic Habits by James Clear. I know you've heard of it. Go look at it and read it if you haven't. And I do recommend that to all my clients. So as an experienced therapist, I recommend that as a resource for sure. Other recommendations I have for breaking bad habits, as someone who's a bit logotherapeutic like myself, who appreciates the psychoanalytic side and likes to go deep into values with people, typically you can understand what drives a bad habit by what it's fulfilling in our life. So you go a couple layers deeper and you create the curiosity around, why is this useful? What is the drinking actually doing? What is the bedtime scrolling actually doing? What is the porn use actually satisfying? All of these questions, you're really getting down to, what is the bad habit satisfying? Because it's doing something. Because if you're cognitively thinking this is a bad habit, but then you're continuing to step into it, that's a disconnect between your mind and your brain, the thinking part of you, versus this autonomic, driven, response based side of yourself. And they're fighting. Some part of you really wants this vice, this bad habit. What part is that? And you can make a strong case that, well, it's environment. I've been doing it for so long and it's hard to break that. That's true. There's also very real situations where people just snap out of something and they change overnight, where they hear just the right thing and it clicks. So, environment and the space that you're in and the habits that you've just held over time, and that's what's familiar, those matter a lot. But if that's the extent of your answer, you're selling your own capabilities to change way too short. Because you can just change overnight. Most people don't. It's really hard and it's usually not in our control. Things just click when they click. But if you can understand what this is taking care of, maybe deep down it's this need for connection and I'm not getting that, we can start to adjust the patterns of life and we can start to fulfill that need in other areas and make it just not as necessary to use the vice or the bad habit to take care of that. It becomes less useful. Another thing is, people, I think, underestimate how much change they actually need to do. So some people are like, well, I just want to stop using my phone at night. But sometimes you might have to change your whole day to make that actually possible. And nighttime comes again and you're jumping right back into the habit because not enough has changed. So sometimes I think people underestimate how dramatic their change has to be for something that seems relatively small, but it isn't. It's a big deal. So yeah, I actually didn't plan to go super deep into habit questions today, but that's what we focus on. So hopefully that's helpful. I'll stop it there. Not going to do a ton of questions today. We're over 20 minutes in, and I'll leave it there. So if you enjoyed this, please like, share, subscribe, tell people about it. Leave your own questions in the comments. I'd rather answer questions that people watching have than go on Quora, despite how much I love Quora. So yeah, that's that for this Friday, and I'll look forward to seeing everyone next week. See ya.